Welcome back to Lokad. Collaboration is, quite simply, the backbone of any successful supply chain. Effective data sharing, however, plays a potential key role in this process, at least between companies, for example, retailers and their suppliers. Joannes Vermorel joins me in studio today to share Lokad's perspective on this, as well as all of the reasons why it benefits everyone involved. Now, as always, if you like what you hear, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn. And with that, I give you today's conversation. So, Joannes, thank you for joining me in studio, as always. As I mentioned in the introduction, the topic was collaborative supply chain. Now, obviously, anyone who watched our recent debate on forecast value added will be aware that collaboration was a big part of that. And the popular take on collaboration is people being involved in the forecasting process, making manual changes to forecasts. When you talk about collaborative supply chain, what is your definition?
For me, when we refer to collaborative supply chain, I refer to a sort of collaboration that goes beyond being simply client and vendor to a simple transactional relationship between companies. So we're talking of something beyond just being a client and a vendor. But looking at companies. So I'm not talking of collaboration within the company. That's a given that people within a company collaborate to various extent with various practices, various tools, etc., etc. But within a company, it is very difficult to not do anything, for a large company, collaboratively to some extent.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, some companies might be mentor and enforce silos, but the reality is that unless your company is completely dysfunctional, silos will not be rigidly enforced. The reality, however, if you have a series of companies that are, partnering so that the flow of goods and material go through all those companies to serve the market, their collaboration becomes much more, I would say, difficult because it's not a given. It is not a given. So they are usually the strategic sort of collaboration where, companies adopt long-term perspectives, shared long-term perspectives so that their investments align. I believe in this market, I am investing in it, and you also believe in the same market. And so you do a similar investment on your end so that together we have something that will be very good for the market. So that's very good. But that's, I would say, anything that is strategic, we are talking of long time horizons. I mean, so we are talking of things that will take, years to unfold. Extremely useful. There is also something much more tactical, which is you have a whole series of companies that are, in touch for a given flow of physical goods. How do you get all those companies to be in complete sync so that everything is like everything is flowing extremely smoothly? And that I'm not talking again about long-term investment. That would be the strategic horizon. I'm talking of something that is literally, how do I make sure that when orders are passed, everything is ready, that the transporter has the right capacity, the warehouse has the right capacity, that the manufacturer has enough raw materials to manufacture what is needed, etc., etc. So you have like tight coordination so that you minimize the amount of frictions that you have between those companies as they transact. As simple as that.
Don't companies already have a smoothed out tactical collaboration like this?
Mostly no. Okay. I mean, mostly no. Again, what do I mean? What do you mean smooth? If you mean smooth, that it's possible to pass an order to your suppliers, yes, it already exists, and maybe those companies even have EDI, so electronic data interchange, so that the orders are passed electronically. Yes, but if it's purely transactional, then whenever, let's say, the client do anything that is surprising, well, the supplier is going to be surprised. So again, at the strategic level, phone calls can be made to arrange things. But if we are talking of something that would be at the execution level, we are talking of potentially thousands of SKUs, if not 10,000s, dozens of locations, if not hundreds. And all of that has to be updated on a daily basis. So obviously, if we're really looking at the fine-grained execution, having a good relationship with a partner is a prerequisite, but it's clearly not enough. You're over the phone or through an email, you're not going to send the sort of information that would be needed to have like very, very smooth operational execution of the flow.
Well, then, as I mentioned in the introduction, this sort of tees up the central topic for today, which is the idea of data sharing and how key a role that plays in a truly collaborative supply chain. So, Joannes, could you unpack it a little bit? Using an example, again, you were talking about companies and their partners. If you said, let's say, a retailer and their suppliers, how exactly does data sharing facilitate better collaboration?
So the idea of making the flow, the execution of the flow, easier, leaner, reducing, I would say, points of contentions, etc., has been floating around for decades. Even when I started Lokad back in 2008, it was already, I would say, an old idea by the time. I mean, more than a decade old. And in theory, since pretty much like 1995, everything has been in place in terms of software for, I would say, a widespread adoption of I would say, collaborative supply chain practices geared around the sharing of data. So a very simple example of that would be, let's say you have a retail chain. The retail chain has a series of important FMCG companies that happen to be its suppliers. There is value in sharing the sales data. So obviously, every FMCG company should not have access to anything but the sales data of its own products. The data will probably, for a lot of reasons, be aggregated at, let's say, per product per week, for every single store. And along that, in order to so this information is already very useful. It gives the FMCG company an angle to avoid most of the bullwhip effects, where if you see a big order coming, is it because of an internal management decision by the retail chain, or is it because there is really traction in the market? If you can see the sales, you would know the difference. But also, you can also go further in communicating the stock levels, again, restricted for every supplier would get only its own slice. And finally, it is also possible to communicate market shares. Again, you don't want to communicate the sales of your competitors or the retail chain out of courtesy, to keep the playing field fair for all the suppliers that happen to be competitors. You would not communicate the raw sales data of your peers. But what you would communicate would be, for example, your market shares across, let's say, product categories. Again, probably per store per week or something like that. And here it becomes very interesting, because for the FMCG companies that happen to be supplying this retail chain, then with this information, they can, for example, assess whether a marketing push that they are doing, is it really succeeding at capturing market share? Because maybe they can see their sales going up, but if everybody is going up, then it's a wash. Conversely, you can see that your sales are going down, but the sales of your competitors are going down much faster, in which case, it's a success. So again, if you just look at the simple variations without having access to the market share, it is the results can be confusing, and in fact, you might conclude the opposite of what is true. Now, the example that I just gave is a very old use case. It is typically done by panelists. And the reality is that...
So when you say panelist,
it's a class of companies. It's a class of companies. So for, I would say, large general retail networks, it has been done for decades. But what I observed is that the amount of friction that goes into this sort of services is very, very high. And in fact, if we put a little bit aside, major retail chains and their FMCG suppliers, those practices of sharing data are very rare. And even when they are present, they come with a massive amount of friction, typically with third parties like panelists who are charging really what to me appears as completely extravagant fees to accomplish those sort of basic services.
Well, again, that brings up a key point, because again, we will get into what that looks like under the hood when Lokad does it. But you've already said, if I go back just a step, that the technological prerequisites to facilitate this kind of service have been around for about 30 years. And the benefits were manifestly clear, or have been presumably since time immemorial. So then the question becomes, why exactly have people not... why is this not the norm already?
It's mostly death by a thousand cuts. So in theory, sharing this data would be like super easy, barely an inconvenience. But in practice, it is not, for plenty of reasons. When first, if you just look at the SQL permissions that you have on a database, it turned out that it is not adequate to share data directly with one of your suppliers. You cannot say, I am going to give this supplier access to this table, but only those lines. So that's just an example. So, okay, what can you do? Obviously, you can make an extraction from this table to another table dedicated to this one supplier. But then, if you have 300 suppliers, that means that you're going to create 300 tables. It's not exactly, I would say, an elegant design. And if you have like dozens of tables to share, at least in parts, again, if you have hundreds of suppliers, that's going to be very quickly a massive hurdle in a traditional SQL database. Again, nothing impossible, but just tons of friction. So, and then you are creating also a workload that you don't want to create again in a transactional system. So you would need to first stage that with a data lake. Again, nothing. Even 30 years ago, you could use a relational database as your data lake. It's not. You don't need modern cloud technology to do that. But again, it was friction. And then you share data, but you're sharing raw data, and your partner may not be immediately equipped with all the plumbing to actually do anything with this data, which means that you share data, but then you expect your partners to go into IT projects of their own to merely be able to read this data, or just use them in any meaningful sense. So
just a series of smaller steps.
A series of small problems. I mean, first, I would say the IT friction for whoever wants to share is quite high. I mean, it's not massively high. We are not talking like upgrading an ERP or something, but the friction can be significant. And then for every single partner, in turn, they have to, they need the support of their IT. And usually IT has already years of backlog, so it's a problem. And then you want to keep all of that running smoothly, reliably, securely for a long period of time. Again, if you have a lot of friction, it's going to be difficult.
Especially for what is essentially you're asking a favor of your suppliers as well.
Yes, and you see, suppliers, if you give them access to a slice of data, what are they going to do with that? The answer is, in the very short term, nothing. They will probably, it might be a frustration, but they might actually wait an entire year before starting to do anything, because for them, it's not a given that you will just maintain this courtesy over time. So most likely, if you engage in such a process, what you can expect in the short term is partners to say that they are very happy and do nothing, and wait until you've earned their trust that this collaborative supply chain is not like a temporary gimmick. It's here to stay, and you're committed in making it work over a long period of time. So even if we are talking about a collaborative supply chain at the for the execution, so short-term horizon, it will take a sizable amount of time for everybody to update their own supply chain practices to take advantage of this data. And they will not do that until the partners are very confident that this is going to stay, which can take, again, most likely, month and maybe even more than a year.
Well, again, you've outlined quite a bit there, the death by 1,000 cuts. A grim image, but
Yes.
you've outlined it again, and it's not necessarily that it's an insurmountable ask. It's just that it's a series of small, consistent things. Each one needs to be attended to. And my question then is, how does Lokad approach it in a way that bypasses the death by 1,000 cuts?
So what we have released, because it has been released more than a month ago, is an addition to the Lokad platform where features where an existing client of us can decide to share securely and reliably a slice of their data with a partner of their choosing, and this partner will get a Lokad account of their own. And we are providing that as a courtesy of Lokad for our existing client base. So the bottom line is that Lokad already has a platform, and this is a multi-tenant platform. So for us, it is I would say it was possible for Lokad to engineer a solution that is extremely lean. And that's the important thing, is that if you want this sort of initiative to work, it has the amount of friction, the amount of overhead, both in terms of process, of IT, of computing resources, all of that has to be extremely low. And I believe, although technology has been around, floating around for decades, there is nothing fundamentally, difficult about that. In practice, those frictions were almost always way too high, and thus it did not happen. And the problem is compounded by the fact that the return on investment is not immediate. Again, as I said, if you start doing that, most likely what will happen during the next year is nothing. Your partners will just wait to make sure that you're really committed to this course of action before truly modifying their practices, their supply chain practices, to take advantage of the information that you provide. So that makes this sort of proposal fairly dicey, unless you have an extremely affordable, lean approach where that can support this sort of delays.
Well, I mean, you were talking about cost. I mean, if I understood you correctly, and I know that I did, but just to say it out loud, the service that you're providing, the data sharing functionality, is being provided by our clients who already pay us.
Yes.
To their partners. So essentially, we're providing a service to the partners of our clients as a courtesy.
Exactly.
So it actually costs them directly nothing.
Exactly. That's a new service that we have released a month ago for collaborative supply chain, and it's a capability of the Lokad platform to take essentially a slice of data in an existing account and make this slice of data available as a data source into a separate account. And we are committed to basically provide that as a courtesy, so that an existing client can take advantage of that at no extra cost, and we don't charge the partner either, at least for the foreseeable future. The key idea being that for Lokad, my own perspective on these features is have Lokad provide more value to the existing clients, and not really necessarily create an additional revenue stream. I think we are good on that front. And again, as I point out, when the technology is done right, the reality is that it is very affordable for Lokad to provide this service.
Is there just to speak momentarily about the logistics of this, is there a tipping point beneath which it's less effective and above which it's more effective for a client? So, for example, if you're an FMCG client and you have 1,000 suppliers, if they were only able to provide 500, so 50% of their suppliers, they get 500%.
An FMCG will probably not have thousands of suppliers, but maybe 50.
As an example.
50.
Okay.
You mean in terms of numbers of suppliers? Lokad, again, the architecture of Lokad makes it relatively straightforward. So obviously, if we are talking of suppliers that are below, I don't know, $1 million a year, it's probably not worth, going for any kind of data sharing strategy. There is just not enough volume. But beyond that, considering that Lokad is extremely lean, I do not see any kind of friction. And obviously, the bigger the client happen to be and its partners happen to be, then the more value there is in doing these sort of things.
And on our end, it's not an appreciable difference in terms of processing or anything like that. Again, if it were 50 suppliers versus 200.
No, obviously the logistics, if you have thousands of suppliers, but that would be not from an FMCG company, that would be a very large, let's say, retail company, or potentially a very large manufacturing company. But yeah, there is a little bit of logistics, but just think of it as not really more than just administrating an enterprise accounts with thousands of users. So yes, there is a little bit of clerical operations. Again, you want to make sure that you don't end up sending data to some unknown parties, and you want to keep everything secure. But fundamentally, putting aside, the clerical aspect, it is very, very lightweight.
Well, in terms, again, speaking of logistics, in terms of implementation and adoption, by definition, our clients are already familiar with the Lokad platform because they pay us. They're our clients. What you're talking about is providing, as a courtesy, access to the Lokad platform to their suppliers who are not directly clients with us. They are the partners of our clients. So in terms of using these, how suppliers might not actually have familiarity with the plumbing, so to speak, the software plumbing of Lokad. So how is that supposed to work?
So the way it would work is an existing client. Obviously, we are not going to do anything without having, the explicit approval and blessing of the client company who is already using Lokad. So it's not something that happened without their, their consent. It would be if they show an interest for that, they would say, what are the list of suppliers that you want us to support? What are the definition of their slice of data? So again, every client of Lokad has a point of contact through their appointed supply chain scientist at Lokad. So they would probably engage a dialogue with the supply chain scientist, say, here is our list of suppliers that we want to embark on this journey of where we want to share data with them for their benefits and ultimately our benefits, so that we'll be better served. And they would give us, probably the list of contacts that one with at least one, maybe possibly several contacts for every supplier, and we would just create a Lokad account for each one of those supplier list, and then it's a web app. So the supplier would just have access to the data plus access to a list of ready-made dashboards.
There we go. Yeah,
that present the data in a digestible way. So it's a web app. So fundamentally, you have access to reports presenting analytics. And then, if you want, you also have access to the raw data.
Yes.
But if they want to extract the raw data, they would have either to export that as Excel spreadsheets or flat files if they want to export it through FTP and the I would say the capabilities of the Lokad platform that are intended for direct IT integration. But day one, they would already have access to the relevant analytics from a web app, so that they don't need any extra IT plumbing on their side.
In terms of maintenance, though, that is still creating additional accounts. So for example, you're Lokad, I'm your client, and Max, who's behind the camera over there, is my supplier. I have an account, I know how to use it. If my account goes down, I know who to contact, the supply chain scientist in charge of my account. Max is not your client, but he has an account on the Lokad platform. If his account goes haywire,
no,
how do we
obviously,
deal with
Lokad, part of our commitment would be, if we provide, basic analytics, we just maintain those basic analytics. Then if a partner wants, I would say, much more fancy analytics, and if they want to bring their own data to do even more, then we are, it's a different discussion. Again, the idea is that Lokad, my core motivation for this feature is just to help Lokad gain a market awareness. So the idea is that we will provide that basically sharing the raw data is very affordable, so we can do that as a piece of courtesy. Having some basic descriptive analytics on top of it is also very affordable, so we can also do that as a courtesy. If then one of those guest companies using a Lokad account is interested and they want bespoke analytics for their case, and they even want to bring some of their data to supplement that extra, that's a different discussion, and that would be typically arranged exactly the same way we discuss with our clients. So then that's the question of how much, what is the size of the commitment that you expect from Lokad for the task that you want us to accomplish on your behalf.
Okay. Well, I only have really one final thought, which is to present the perspective of the devil's advocate. So if someone were listening and they were of the opinion that, okay, that sounds cool, but Joannes might be overstating this case. I mean, again, the presentation here is, this is essentially the piece that completes the puzzle of a collaborative supply chain. But in effect, what you're talking about is folder sharing. Again, not to be dismissive or reductive, but like that is a potential perspective that someone might say, like, that's, I already have a Dropbox. Now, to that challenge, what do you say? The person who says that's not a game changer, what you're describing.
Oh, you see, the thing is that it is not, I mean, it is not a technological breakthrough. There is nothing remotely sophisticated about what I described. Again, these sort of things have been, would have been, for 3 decades, have been very easy. They were even feasible since the 80s, but they became, I would say, fairly accessible in the late 90s. What I'm just saying is that in practice, for the last 3 decades, what I observed is that the IT friction was sufficient to undermine those initiatives. I've talked to many companies who have tried and given up on this sort of initiatives over the years because the friction was too high. So again, the problem is that the return on investment will take years to come. That's the thing, is that everybody needs to amend their own supply chain practices to take advantage of those new data. But nobody wants to do that until it's absolutely clear that this thing is there to stay. So if you are looking for an ROI overnight, this is not going to happen. And so unless you have a solution that is extremely affordable, the reality is that those sort of things are started, and then 12 months down the road, they are shut down just because not enough return on investment yet, and too much IT friction. So my take is that the value is fairly straightforward. It has been identified for decades, but again, that's a death by a thousand cuts. It's we are talking of companies that have a lot of IT backlog, so they don't have that much, spare capacity for projects that will have an ROI in years from now. So my message is that I think Lokad, where it can be a game changer, is that we make it sufficiently affordable so that you can start now, and it's fine then if it takes 1 year or 2 for you to see the results, because the reality is that the cost will be extremely low for you during all this period where your partners will just be, waiting to see if you can maintain the same course of action for a long period of time.
Right. Well, bon, I should also point out at this moment that we have published about this functionality on our website. The link to that will be available in the description box under this video on YouTube. If it's on LinkedIn, it will be in the post with this video. And I kindly direct any interested viewers to check that for more information. So, Joannes, I won't take any more of your time on this topic. Thank you very much for joining me, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.